Next on the news, it's a day to rejoice in one of the largest parishes in the Diocese of Brooklyn.
Hundreds fill the streets of Corona to celebrate the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows and a big milestone for the church. I'm Jessica Easthope. That's next.
And Pope Francis addressing several global issues during his flight back to Rome. We'll break them down with Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux. Migrants flown from Florida to Massachusetts now getting the care they need, but the infighting among governors rages on. Plus, how a top golf pro formed a special bond with a young protege. I'm Christine Persichetti. This special edition of Currents News starts right now. A community coming together in faith with a new sense of hope. The Catholic presence in Corona, Queens is alive and well. That's what Bishop Robert Brennan said as he celebrated the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows Thursday night, along with the church's 150th anniversary and the restoration of its clock and bell tower. Currents News' Jessica Easthope was there to capture all the excitement.
It stands above the buzzing streets in the heart of Corona. On Thursday, its chime told hundreds it's time to celebrate.
This is a sign of hope for all the church. This is a church that's fully alive.
Our Lady of Sorrows Church has a brand new bell tower. Its clock, the only public one in the area. For a long time, its hands stood still. But now they tick again with the beat of songs praising Mary, the Mother of God. The community raised $250,000 to restore it.
It just goes to show you the passion and commitment that this community has for, Our Lady of Sorrows and for our faith.
Hundreds joined Bishop Robert Brennan in a procession through the streets for the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows, a display of devotion and faith as the church continues to show support for its immigrant-rich population as the city experiences a recent influx.
This is the church. This is the church of today, the church of the future. We walk together as a church in procession because we have to walk together with each other through life.
The church has been the mother of the immigrants, being there for them, especially when everyone else is a little bit hesitant to welcome them.
The church was founded 150 years ago by Italian immigrants when Catholics were a minority in the country. For parishioners today, it remains a beacon of hope through modern struggles, like the COVID-19 pandemic. The church lost 100 parishioners to the virus, a part of its history they want to leave behind in this new chapter.
It's a place for relief. It's a place for comfort. It's a place for community, especially after COVID.
We lost a lot of people from here, but today is a victory.
With the money raised for the new bell tower, Our Lady of Sorrows is continuing to improve its facilities for its more than 10,000 parishioners. In Corona, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
There's a lot more that you haven't seen from the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows. Coming up later in the newscast, we'll have more images from the big celebration. The Pope is now back at the Vatican after a busy trip to Kazakhstan. And during his press conference aboard the flight back to Rome, the Holy Father covered a number of topics, including the war in Ukraine. After 3 days in Kazakhstan, Pope Francis boarded the papal plane back to Rome and spent 45 minutes answering reporter questions. Most of the focus was on the war in Ukraine. The Holy Father said he does not exclude engaging in dialogue with countries that start wars, though he did say establishing dialogue with Russia may be difficult. The Pope also said supplying weapons to Ukraine may be morally acceptable, but that depends on the intention.
It is a political decision which can be morally accepted if it is done according to the conditions of morality, which are many. But it can be immoral if it is done with the intention of provoking more war or selling weapons or discarding those weapons that are no longer needed. The motivation is what largely qualifies the morality of this act.
Since the Pope spoke about the need to defend religious freedom during this trip, the Holy Father was asked about Hong Kong Cardinal Joseph Zen, whose trial begins in the upcoming days.
To qualify China as democratic or anti-democratic, I am not convinced, because it's such a complex country with a complex rhythm. Yes, it is true that there are things that seem undemocratic to us. That is true. Cardinal Zen is going to trial these days, I believe, and he says what he feels. And you can see that there are limitations there.
For more on Pope Francis's trip and his remarks on the papal plane, let's bring in Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux. She was traveling with the Pope and is now back in Rome. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Christine.
So, Elise, as we just mentioned, the trial for Cardinal Zen is set to begin in just a few days. You asked the Pope whether he sees this as a violation of religious freedom, but he didn't directly answer you. How concerned do you think the Pope is that this situation will break down dialogue between the Vatican and China?
You know, I think the Pope is very aware of Cardinal Zen's trial, and that's probably why he didn't want to speak about it directly. You know, who knows what the Vatican's doing in the background, right? So they might be trying to do something behind the scenes, and that's why he didn't want to speak about it, or he just didn't want to ruffle feathers because this agreement is about to be renewed. So I don't think he sees the trial against Cardinal Zen as a threat to the agreement. I think the Vatican is going to try to renew this deal no matter what happens. So I think they're very uncomfortable, obviously, with the situation involving Cardinal Zen, but I don't think they're willing to close the door themselves. I think they are going to do everything they can to keep it open for as long as possible.
Okay, during the trip, the Pope condemned the war in Ukraine without calling out Russia and also called for peace. But on the papal plane, he said it can be morally acceptable to arm Ukraine. So after months of trying to stay, as neutral as possible, do you think the Pope is being more open about the war now? And if so, why?
Well, I think going to Kazakhstan for him was very strategic. For a long time, the Pope has said that he wants to go to both Russia and Ukraine. So I think Kazakhstan right now is the closest that he can actually get. It shares a 5,000-mile border with Russia, and it's just a stone's throw from Ukraine. So I think he really went there with the intention of sending a message to both of them. He wanted to tell the Ukrainians that he was close to them, but he also wanted to tell Russia that he was willing to engage, but also that he has serious problems with what's going on right now, with the type of rhetoric that we're seeing from civil leaders, but particularly out of the church as well, from religious leaders. He did not mention specifically Russian President Vladimir Putin or the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill. He did not mention those guys specifically, but in his speeches throughout, he sent very clear messages. And so I think it was inevitable that he was going to say something on the trip back as well. Trying to walk a very fine line still, but be as supportive as he can in the process.
So the Pope recently said he wasn't going to travel to Ukraine because of his knee issues, but he did announce another trip on the plane. Do you think a trip to Ukraine will ever happen?
I think that depends a lot on whether he's going to get an invitation from Russia. And that is the big question mark right now. I think the Pope would really like to go to Ukraine, but I don't think he would do that if he perceives that it will cause problems with Russia. So right now, I don't think either of those trips are realistic. I don't think Ukraine or Russia is going to happen anytime soon. As much as the Pope wants it, I know he wants it very much, and the church there wants it very much. But he always says we have to have the right circumstances, and I don't know that those circumstances are going to present themselves.
Okay, and as far as this trip to Kazakhstan, what were the Pope's impressions of this country?
Well, he said on the plane that he was surprised a lot by the people and the vibrancy of it, and especially being such a small Catholic community there. I think he was really impressed by that. He was there to attend a Congress of leaders of world and traditional religions. It's been happening since 2003. And he really sees that as bringing people together to get on the same page about the need for peace. So I think he's impressed with Kazakhstan and its efforts in this regard.
All right, Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux. Thanks so much for keeping us informed.
Thank you, Christine.
The chairman and CEO of NYCHA is stepping down following confusion over whether there was arsenic in the water at Manhattan's Jacob Riis houses. Greg Russ has been CEO since August of 2019 when he was appointed by then Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mayor Eric Adams did not tie the shakeup to the water scare, but said the chairman and CEO roles will be split moving forward. Currents News first told you about the water rose at that complex on Monday, and several residents even filed a lawsuit against NYCHA. But the city says there's no more issues. Mayor Eric Adams even going so far as to drink straight from the tap to prove there isn't any arsenic in the water.
Nothing's better than New York City water.
The mayor declared the water safe to drink after an Illinois-based lab retracted its test results that detected the heavy metal in the drinking water. But one resident of the Jacob Breeze houses in Manhattan says he has arsenic poisoning. And as Jessica Easthope reports, he wants answers.
Beads of sweat form on Dennis Diaz's forehead, but it's not the late summer heat. It's arsenicosis.
Diarrhea, headaches, dizziness, sweatiness.
On Saturday, Mayor Eric Adams announced tests showing traces of arsenic in the Reese house's tap water were false. This days after the nearly 4,000 residents were told to stop drinking it. But Dennis, who's lived here his entire life, has a lot of questions he wants answered.
The smoke's coming out my sink.
He was already drinking this. Water with stringy white particles in it. Dennis says if there was never any arsenic, what were those particles? And how could it be that a test showed he had a level of 1 milligram per deciliter of arsenic in his blood?
I felt betrayed. I should be safe drinking water. We live in New York City.
The test was done days after he stopped drinking that and started drinking this. The bottled water NYCHA was giving out. But Dennis said his doctor's not convinced it's making its way out of his system because he's still sick.
Biohazard container, I gotta urinate.
He has to collect his own urine for 24 hours for another test. According to the CDC, traces of arsenic stay in urine longer than blood.
I will never lose my faith in God and Jesus. I'm hoping this ain't in my system when they do the final test.
Only adding to Dennis's confusion, according to a statement from Mayor Eric Adams' office, the lab that initially tested the water admitted to introducing arsenic into the samples that led to false results. Dennis says he doesn't know who to believe.
You know, I suffer from mental illness and post-traumatic stress, and on top of this, it just got my head spinning.
Currents News reached out to NYCHA, but a spokesperson declined to comment. Other tests done by the same lab showed Legionella bacteria present in the Reese house's water. The city is claiming those results are also false. Despite the latest reports, the city is still urging residents not to drink their tap water until final results are analyzed.
I don't think I could ever drink this water again.
In the East Village, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Memorials stretched throughout the Diocese of Brooklyn to remember the 9/11 terror attacks 21 years later. First responders were joined by Bishop Robert Brennan as they processed over the Brooklyn Bridge. The bishop walked with the group to the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph, where a special mass was held. During his homily, Bishop Brennan said 9/11 taught us a lesson about the value of human life. He also expressed his gratitude to the first responders who continue to protect the city. There's a lot more news headed your way. They landed in Marthas Vineyard, but what help are the migrants getting? We'll look at the latest in the battle between the states. Also, he's settling into his new school. We'll speak with a migrant mother who has a son enrolled in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Plus, mourners stretching on for miles as the farewell continues for Queen Elizabeth. The 50 migrants flown to Marthas Vineyard this week are now getting humanitarian support at Joint Base Cape Cod. This as the escalating feud between Democratic and Republican governors and mayors continues. As Mike Valerio reports, it's also drawing an angry response from President Biden.
Cheers this morning on Marthas Vineyard, moments before migrants headed on buses and then a ferry to a Cape Cod military base, all for humanitarian support and shelter.
But I hope that for all of them, that in all of their travels that they've had right now, that these 3 days, I hope they feel exceptionally loved.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis flew the asylum seekers from Texas to Marthas Vineyard, saying, quote, every community in America should be sharing in the burden, end quote.
There's also going to be buses, and there will likely be more flights. But I'll tell you this, the legislature gave me $12 million. We're going to spend every penny of that to make sure that we're protecting the people of the state of Florida.
But President Biden accused DeSantis and others of playing politics with human beings.
Instead of working with us on solutions, Republicans are playing politics with human beings, using them as props. What they're doing is simply wrong. It's un-American. It's reckless.
The U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts says she'll speak with the Justice Department about DeSantis' move. White House officials are also meeting Friday to discuss potential legal options as the families who have come so far continue their journeys. Mike Valerio, Currents News.
The news on the migrants leaving Marthas Vineyard comes as the bishops mark National Migration Week, which starts on Monday. In a statement, the bishop said this week provides a special opportunity for encounter, accompaniment, and prayer, as well as a chance for Catholics and others of goodwill to join together in support of those who depend on our collective voice. May this week help us to experience a renewed sense of what it means to live as brothers and sisters, traveling together on the same journey. The Diocese of Immigrants is welcoming everyone and doing everything they can to help families make a better life here in America. This week, Currents News' Jessica Easthope had the story of a mother and her son who is now starting a new school year with high hopes thanks to one Catholic academy in East New York.
Iraima Ramirez is picking out a uniform for her son Marcel. He's new to Salve Regina Catholic Academy and to this country. Unlike his classmates in 7th grade, he doesn't speak any English and lives in a shelter. He hasn't had a permanent home in 9 months. The situation in my country has made it impossible to provide food and necessities for my family or take care of their health on a salary that added up to $15 a month. Iraima's family is one of thousands from Central and South America who have landed in New York City with just the clothes on their backs. The dictatorship in Venezuela has gotten to a point of lawlessness, and so we had to abandon everything we have and risk our lives to find something better. When they arrived in Brooklyn, the family's unbreakable Catholic faith led them to church, where they met Father Ed Mason.
These folks have been literally dumped in our city. To be able to serve them and help them at this time is really a blessing.
In the last month, Father Mason has raised more than $25,000 to help Iraima's family and 24 others, some of whom came on buses from Texas. That includes making sure Marcel's Catholic education is free of charge.
Showing them the generosity of spirit that we are called to have as Catholics. We definitely want to be able to provide that for them.
In the Diocese of Immigrants, Superintendent Deacon Kevin McCormick says this is what the mission of Catholic education looks like.
If someone is going to be a follower of Jesus, they have to protect the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner. Whoever comes to our schools, we will work and find a way to educate them.
And Iraima says she finally feels like someone has her back. They have opened their hearts and blessed us. They're able to get an education and also have their faith fed. Father Mason is helping 3 more children enroll at Salve Regina Catholic Academy, where they'll participate in the school's new ESL program and attend tuition free. In East New York, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
If you're also interested in a Catholic education from the Diocese of Brooklyn, just visit CatholicSchoolsBQ.org or call 718-965-7380 for more information. Over to London now, where mourners continue to line up to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II. The queue to see the Queen's coffin stretched on for more than 5 miles, forcing people to wait some 14 hours. Because of that, on Friday morning, the government announced that the line had reached capacity and no one would be able to join it for at least 6 hours. Queen Elizabeth's funeral is on Monday. The Pope will be represented at the service. The Vatican's foreign minister, Archbishop Paul Gallagher, will attend Queen Elizabeth's funeral in place of Pope Francis. The Archbishop was born in Liverpool and is the first Englishman to hold his position as the 2nd highest ranking diplomat in the Vatican. Currents News and the Tablet will have continuing coverage as the Queen is laid to rest. In this week's paper, the Tablet delves deeper into the Queen's faith. Her Christianity was a hallmark of her reign, calling it an inspiration and an anchor of her life. Learn how the Queen relied on her belief in God during her charge as ruler of the United Kingdom and the ways she kept her faith even as her country became more and more secularized. To read all this and more, just pick up the paper at your local church. You can get future editions sent straight to you by subscribing at thetablet.org. If trends of the past 3 decades continue for another half-century, Christianity will lose its majority status in the U.S. by 2070. That's according to a new demographic study by the Pew Research Center. The study puts Christians currently at 64% of the U.S. population. Under 4 different scenarios modeled by Pew, the numbers vary widely. The percentage of Christians in the U.S. could drop to 54% or fall to as low as 35% by 2070. The different scenarios represent different rates of switching, which Pew defines as a change between the religion in which a person was raised and their present religious identity. Still to come on Currents News, he was amazing. A Cathedral Prep student sings for the Amazins, and we have the video. From the diamond to the greens, why these 2 golfers have an unbreakable bond. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Cathedral Prep High School and Seminary went to the Mets game Wednesday night, but not just to see the game. They went to see a very special performance of the national anthem. That's senior Anthony Matson, who auditioned to sing for the Amazins and was chosen. Anthony is a classical singer who has performed at the Metropolitan Opera, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and other places. And as Anthony sang, he had his own little cheering section, which included Cathedral Prep alumni, students, parents, and faculty. He was amazing. And Bishop Brennan spent some quality time with the students at Malloy High School. At the start of every year, the school celebrates a liturgy of the Holy Spirit with each grade, a reminder of God's constant presence in their lives. Well, on Friday, seniors celebrated a Mass with Bishop Brennan. The bishop even got to spend some time with some seniors, speaking to a group of campus ministry volunteers and learning about their goals for the year and their career ambitions. He is one of the top adaptive golfers in the world and a golf pro at the Country Club of Birmingham in Alabama. And now Chris Biggins has a 6-year-old protege, and he shares a special bond with him.
What do we say to the golf ball before we hit it?
Bye-bye, ball.
Bye-bye, ball. See you later. Give it a rip.
The golf pro and Shep Maddox have a friendship that goes far beyond the golf course. They're both talented athletes in their own right, and they both have cerebral palsy. Biggins says he first saw Shep a few years ago at a playground using a walker, but when he saw Shep recently on the golf course, he was running without his walker. So Chris decided to ask him to hit a few golf balls.
In the past, he might have had doubts about his abilities, but when he's on the golf course, he doesn't have any doubts. He feels like he's impressive. He's turned into someone who was disabled into someone that's a superhero.
Shep's mother, Katie Maddox, says Chris's relationship with her son has been an answer to her prayers and that God has brought the 2 of them together. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. We leave you now with more sights and sounds from the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows. Hope to see you again next time.
I see